Hello everyone! With the release of Snezhnaya, Odette will be the one new limited 5-star character being introduced in Genshin version 7.0. As the first limited 5-star of the region, she plays into the central new mechanic of Snezhnaya, stellar reactions, serving as a general support for the archetype. And contrary to what some people may believe, Odette looks like an incredibly strong stellar support for any stellar related team, both currently and likely in the future. So to see just how strong she can be, in this guide I'll be going over how Odette works, the best ways to build her potential best teams, and analyzing her place in the meta in terms of overall strength and pull value, while also citing pre-release calcs from different theory crafters, including TCers from Mobalytics who have a written Odette guide up on their website with all the important information on her. Odette is a 5-star cryo sword character who ascends with crit damage. Her primary role is to be a support and sub-DPS for any stellar team. As with her special passive, she enables your team to trigger both existing stellar glimmer reactions, which are stellar conduct and stellar swirl. She also buffs the base damage of each stellar reaction by up to 14% if she has at least 2000 attack. Since the two stellar glimmer reactions are a key part of Odette's kit, let's go over what each of them do and how they work. First, there's Stellar Conduct. Stellar Conduct is triggered by applying Cryo and Electro on an enemy when you have a character on the team with a passive that enables you to trigger Stellar Conduct. Triggering the reaction doesn't deal any damage, but instead spawns a Starlight Prism, which creates a large zone called a Polestar Field for 5 seconds, with the duration getting refreshed when the reaction is triggered again. While in the Polestar Field, certain characters will enter the Radiant Stellar Conduct state, which activates important bonuses within their kits. In addition, enemies in the field will have their physical res reduced by 40%, and the team will gain a stacking cryo and electro damage percent buff and an increased multiplier for stellar conduct damage coming from character abilities, scaling with the amount of cryo and electro application on enemies, including cryo and electro swirls, every 4 seconds. And you can get more stacks in AoE when different hits apply on different enemies. So the more cryo and electro your team puts on an enemy, the higher the stacks, which allows your characters to deal more damage, especially certain characters that can deal direct stellar conduct damage with their abilities. Second, there's Stellar Swirl. Stellar Swirl is triggered by applying Animo onto an enemy with Cryo, as long as you have a character on the team with a passive that enables you to trigger Stellar Swirl. Triggering Stellar Swirl enables Radiant Stellar Swirl, which activates important bonuses in certain character kits. In addition, the reaction itself will deal Animo Stellar Swirl damage and create a Stellar Vortex on the field. This vortex will remain on the field for 3 seconds and will grow and be empowered when you trigger additional Stellar Swirl reactions within the 3-second time frame. At the end of its duration, the vortex will explode, which allows you to jump high in the air, but more importantly, deals AoE Cryo Stellar Swirl damage, applying Cryo to any enemy's hit, with its damage and AoE scaling with the number of Stellar Swirl reactions you triggered within its 3-second duration. So the more Stellar Swirl reactions you trigger, the bigger the vortex explosion damage. And if you trigger 6 Stellar Swirl reactions before 3 seconds, the vortex will explode early. On top of the reaction damage, certain characters can deal direct Stellar Swirl damage with their abilities. Lastly, both Stellar Swirl and Stellar Conduct can both be triggered at the same time in the same team. However, Radiant Stellar Conduct will take priority, so units that have Radiant Stellar Glimmer in their kits, which caters part of their abilities to be Stellar Conduct oriented in Stellar Conduct teams and Stellar Swirl oriented in Stellar Swirl teams, will prioritize being Stellar Conduct oriented if you trigger both reactions at the same time. With the 2 stellar reactions explained, let's delve into the rest of Odette's kit. Her elemental skill is her core main ability. When used, Odette deals damage and summons her solo dance double on the field, which is a turret that deals AoE cryo damage every 2 seconds. Then, for 6 seconds after you spawn her dance double, you gain access to Odette's special elemental skill. Using it deals 3 ticks of regular cryo damage, plus a final big cryo hit that deals direct stellar conduct or stellar swirl damage, depending on if Odette is in a stellar conduct team or in a stellar swirl team. In addition, after using her special elemental skill, Odette's dance double will deal additional all-field stellar conduct or stellar swirl damage every 2 seconds, depending on the team she's in. Thus, you'll mainly want to use Odette's skill and special skill in succession so that her turret deals all-field stellar damage. Now in addition, with Odette's A1 passive, spawning her dance double will give Odette 4 stacks of Marvelous Splendor, which each give 15% stellar damage bonus. When Odette swaps out, she will lose 1 stack every second and give that buff to her other party members. So after Odette spawns her turret and goes off field, she will eventually grant all the other teammates 60% stellar damage bonus. Odette's elemental burst simply does AoE cryo damage, gives herself a stellar damage buff, and spawns or refreshes the duration of her dance double turret. So with her burst, you can burst plus special skill instead of skill plus special skill to activate the obvious stellar damage from her turret. However, because of its animation time, it is not important to use. You can definitely still use it if the team you're playing has time to fill in its rotation to fit in her burst, or if your Odette has a lot of investment which makes her personal damage more worth it, or just for the iframes, but generally, you don't need to always use it, and many team calcs do skip it entirely. For her remaining passives, Odette's A4 passive gives her additional stellar damage percent based on her attack. 3000 attack is needed to get the max 30% stellar damage bonus, but she does not need to build 3000 attack. Getting as much as you can is perfectly fine. And Odette's exploration passive allows her to display nearby Snezhnaya resources on your minimap and has a unique dancing component to it. That's everything about Odette's base kit. For talent leveling priority, her elemental skill is her key ability, so level and max that first. Then you can level her burst if you want to use it, but it's not 100% necessary since you don't have to use it. Now, let's go over Odette's Constellations. C1 makes her special elemental skill deal an additional instance of stellar damage. In addition, it increases her A1 passive Marvelous Splendor stack count to 6 and passes the stacks faster to her teammates, allowing Odette to give her teammates 90% stellar damage bonus instead of 60%. C2 gives her A1 passive Marvelous Splendor stacks a stacking attack buff as well as the original stellar damage bonus. In addition, it allows her dance double to shred Cryo and Electro Res in Stellar Conduct teams and Cryo and Animal Res in Stellar Swirl teams. C3 grants 3 skeleton levels. C4 enables her burst to give half of the stellar damage buff she gives to herself to the other party members, making her burst actually worth to use in her teams. And it adds coordinated stellar attacks from Odette when the party deals direct stellar damage to an enemy. C5 grants 3 burst town levels, and lastly, C6 allows Odette to keep her own A1 passive Marvelous Splendor stacks while still also buffing her teammates. And characters that are buffed by the Marvelous Splendor stacks will get additional elevation to their stellar damage. Overall, Odette has very powerful constellations in terms of team damage increase. Her C6 is obviously powerful, but her early constellations like C1 and C2 are very strong as well, some of the best in the game as a sub-DPS and support. Her C2 is especially powerful because it gives res shred, and current Stellar Conduct teams currently don't have good sources of res shred. But even if they get res shred in the future, Odette's C2 will still be very good, as it is still strong in Stellar Swirl teams where 4-piece Viridescent Venerer is generally included. Because of this, early investment into Odette's constellations is better than getting her signature weapon. Since Odette's early constellations are very strong, they are generally higher priority when considering an entire team's vertical investment priority. To give some examples, in a Stellar Conduct Snezhnaya team, because Snezhnaya's constellations are pretty weak in terms of damage increase, getting Odette's C2 is the best gain for the team, followed by Snezhnaya's signature weapon, Yai C2, then Snezhnaya's early constellations. For Cyno and Wriothesley, even though Cyno's signature and Wriothesley's C2 are the best single cost vertical investments you can make for damage, getting Odette C2 is generally the next best investment. And for Stellar Swirl Mizuki, aside from getting Mizuki C6, Odette C2 will be the strongest early vertical investment you can make for the team in 7.0. Next, let's cover Odette's best build options. For weapons, her signature weapon, White Lake Frost Feather, is her best in slot. Crit rate substat with a passive that gives her additional attack percent and stellar crit damage when her skill hits enemies, along with energy restoration when she triggers a stellar reaction or deals direct stellar damage. The weapon does greatly increase her own personal damage. However, Odette generally isn't doing a large majority of her entire team's damage, making her signature only give a minor team damage increase and thus making her constellations an overall better choice for early vertical investment over her signature. For 5-star weapon alternatives, any crit stat sticks are fine to use. 3 examples include Jade Cutter, Cloran signature, and Skirk signature. If you aren't planning on playing the Traveler, you can use their new signature weapon you get for free on Odette, simply as a solid stat stick. For 4-star weapons, the best general weapon option will be Finale of the Deep, the Fontaine Craftable, since it gives a lot of attack, and even without a healer to clear the Bond of Life, it's still solid. Lastly, there's the new Snezhnaya Craftable 4-star sword, Emberwell, and Freedom Sworn. Both of these weapons can be good, but it depends on Odette's team because the passives require Odette to trigger reactions. They won't activate from Odette's direct stellar damage from her abilities. Because of this, these weapon passives won't work in Stellar Swirl teams because cryo units can't trigger Stellar Swirl, only animal ones. And in Stellar Conduct teams, uptime of the passive depends on how many Electro characters are on the team. If the team has one Electro off-fielder like Yai, and you have a cryo on-fielder, Odette can trigger the reaction once in a rotation because she generally goes after Yai, so so the enemy will have Electro to allow her to trigger Stellar Conduct when she uses her double skill and applies Cryo. But after that, since there's so much Cryo being applied with a Cryo on-fielder, Odette won't be able to trigger Stellar Conduct again until the next rotation. As a result, in these teams, she gets 12 seconds of uptime on Emberwell's passive, and Freedom Sworn's passive will rarely be active. But in teams with 2 Electro characters, whether it is 2 Electro off-fielders or 1 Electro off-fielder and 1 Electro on-fielder, she will be able to trigger Stellar Conduct while off-field, so the weapon passive will get full uptime on her. Here is a complete weapon calc for Odette in a triple Cryo Stellar Conduct Snezhnaya team based on both team DPS and personal DPS done by theorycrafter Temeyaro. And here's another weapon comparison for Odette in a double Electro Snezhnaya Stellar Conduct team based on team DPS done by theorycrafter MeowTews. Feel free to pause and take a closer look at the details. Remember that in different teams like Stellar Swirl or double Electro Stellar Conduct, some weapons may become better or worse. For artifacts, in the majority of her teams, Odette is the best holder of 4-piece Heart of the Furnace, the Stellar Support set. 2-piece gives 18% attack, and the 4-piece gives 12% more attack, and the entire team 50% stellar damage bonus for 12 seconds when the holder either triggers a stellar reaction or deals direct stellar reaction damage with their abilities. Since Odette does off-field stellar damage with her dance double turret, she can easily maintain full uptime of the stellar damage buff in any team she's in. Now in some niche scenarios, mainly in Stellar Conduct teams without Yai, or where Odette does more personal damage than Yai, which will generally only happen if you have more vertical investment into Odette, then Odette can use 4-piece Disenchantment, and another support would hold 4-piece Furnace. For main stats, Odette simply wants Attack Hourglass, Attack Goblet, and Crit Circlet, and for substats, prioritize aiming for Crit, then Attack, then Elemental Mastery. Finally, let's go over Odette's best team comps. Odette is a general Stellar support that works in any Stellar Conduct teams or any Stellar Swirl teams. To start with Stellar Conduct, Snezhnaya alongside Yai and Odette will be her strongest team, with the final support having a lot of options. On paper, Sucrose can be the best for damage because of her team-wide EM buff and Res Shred from 4-piece Veritas Venera, especially when swapping the Sucrose twice per rotation for buff uptime. But Cryo supports like Escoffier and Chi-Chi are very strong as well, likely being better in practice than Sucrose because the extra cryo particles help Snezhnaya burst every rotation. C0, Nicole, and Shilonen are solid final support options as well, especially for those who invested in getting their C2s. And for 4-star supports, Alosha, C6 Beidou, and C6 Diona are decent options. If you have C6 Alosha, he will be one of the best final supports you can use. If you don't have a C6, C6 Beidou or C6 Diona will be better as a 4-star support. But if you don't have C6 Beidou or C6 Diona, then a non-C6 Alosha will be a better 4-star support choice. Another unique option is using the Cryo Traveler. Even though they're supposed to be a main DPS in Stellar Conduct teams, they can play as a quick swap DPS in the final team slot by swapping in and using their normal attacks and especially their stellar enhanced charge attack and burst. Now if you have Odette but you don't have Yai, you can use either Alosha or C6 Beidou as the off-field Electro. And then for the final support slot, you can use C6 Diona, C6 Beidou with Alosha for double Electro, or Chi-Chi to fill out the remaining slot while also providing heals and or shields. Or if you want to maximize damage and run sustainless, you can use Escoffier or Sucrose in the remaining support slot. In Stellar Conduct teams, Cryo Traveler is designed to be an on-field main DPS, and with the same kind of team comps that Snezhnaya plays in, they can be a very strong Stellar carry, especially when we are able to unlock their C6R5. Stellar Conduct Sino is looking to really benefit from Odette. Along with Yai as the off-field Electro, though Alosha can be used if you don't have her, Sino's teams look very strong, with a lot of options to choose from for his final support, including Nicole, C6 Alosha, C6 Prune, C6 Beidou, Chi-Chi, C6 Diona, and Shilonen. Stellar Conduct Risley is also getting a big improvement with Odette and Yai as the off-field Electro. Sucrose, Escoffier, and Shilonen are fine to use as the final support slot, but for shielder options, which are recommended for Risley, Nicole, C6 Beidou, Zhongli, and Lan Yan are great to use. Lastly, the Yai plus Odette duo can be used as a sort of wheelchair for non-stellar main DPSs, mainly those who are Electro or Cryo, such as Flynn, Skirk, and Lohan. Obviously, these kinds of teams aren't the greatest, and you should be playing Yai and Odette with a proper Stellar Conduct carry, but these teams can still function. Next, for Stellar Swirl teams, Mizuki is the one Animo Stellar Swirl DPS available in version 7.0, and she will greatly benefit from Odette and Cryo Traveler as supports since they have off-field cryo application, buffs, and good personal damage. Then you also want an Animo support. The most common and accessible option is Sucrose, very strong character that has a little bit of grouping and buffs the team's EM, which increases Stellar Swirl damage. Now if you happen to have C6 Farazan, who increases Animo crit damage, which includes Animo Stellar Swirl damage, on paper, C6 Farazan is better than Sucrose for damage. However, Farazan has high energy requirements and is burst reliant, so in content like Stygian Onslaught, Sucrose may be better in practice. Now if your Cryo Traveler isn't available, such as if you want to play them in Stellar Conduct instead, you can use another cryo support like Chi-Chi or C6 Diona, along with Odette and Sucrose. You can also do the same thing while using Farazan instead of Sucrose. But another potential option is to use both C6 Farazan and Sucrose in a triple Animo team, allowing for a DPS set on Mizuki while still having both 4-piece Viridescent Venerer and 4-piece Instructors on the team. Now if you don't have Odette, you can use Chi-Chi or C6 Diona as an off-field cryo support, along with Cryo Traveler and Sucrose or Farazan as the Anima support. In addition, you can potentially run Yai in the team instead of one of the cryo supports, generally Cryo Traveler, to play a team with both Stellar Swirl and Stellar Conduct. But how effective mixing the stellar reactions actually will be, instead of just focusing on one, depends on how the team plays out in-game on release. Now if you play Snezhnaya without any Electro characters but with just Cryo and Animo characters, she can be played as a Cryo Stellar Swirl DPS instead of a Stellar Conduct DPS. She'll need to swap her set to something like 2-piece attack, but with the Cryo Stellar Swirl support duo of Odette and Cryo Traveler, and an Animo support like Sucrose or Venti, Snezhnaya can be a decent Stellar Swirl DPS. You can also choose to not use the Cryo Traveler and use either Chi-Chi or Venti plus Sucrose for a double Animo support comp. Numbers wise, her ideal Stellar Conduct teams deal significantly more damage, but Snezhnaya's Stellar Swirl teams nevertheless give her team building flexibility, which may be helpful to counter specific enemy mechanics. Lastly, similar to how Yai plus Odette could play as a Stellar Conduct wheelchair, Cryo Traveler plus Odette can kinda play as a Stellar Swirl wheelchair for non-stellar main DPSs. One example of this is playing Cryo Traveler and Odette in a Varka team. Again, it's not the greatest Varka team, and you should be playing Cryo Traveler and Odette with a proper stellar carry, but the team still functions. To conclude this Odette guide, here is my analysis on her place in the meta in terms of overall strength and pull value. Odette is an amazing general stellar support for any stellar related team. On top of enabling the use of stellar reactions for your team, she has off-field cryo application, solid personal damage, and provides strong stellar damage buffs to her Stellar Conduct and Stellar Swirl teams. Every single existing stellar team benefits greatly from having Odette. Since she's a generalist stellar support, she's a versatile unit for stellar team building, allowing you to flex and play both Stellar Conduct and Stellar Swirl teams, working well with any stellar related unit that exists currently and will release in the future. And with the Cryo Traveler being available to everyone for free as a stellar related character, Odette will find at least some value to any account, even if they don't have any other stellar characters. Some people compare Odette to Columbina because of her high power level and versatility, while some others compare her to Shilonen as they worry that being a generalist stellar support will set her up to be replaced in the future. Personally, I think Odette being both a strong sub DPS and support with good supportive constellations actually makes her kit most similar with Linnea, but Odette being extremely versatile in stellar teams pushes her to have some similarities with Columbina. Odette enables all the stellar reactions just like how Columbina enables all the lunar reactions, and the damage increase that Odette provides to stellar teams is a similar increase to what Columbina provides to lunar teams. I do think Columbina is more important to lunar versus Odette to stellar, however, as Columbina doesn't really have a close competitive alternative to her role as a Hydro support in lunar teams. Odette, on the other hand, has a competitive alternative, the Cryo Traveler, who is close to Odette in terms of damage they provide to a team when they are C6R5. Additionally, there is a possibility that the Tsaritsa will fulfill a similar supportive role in stellar teams. However, I don't think this lowers Odette's value as a unit. We don't know what the Tsaritsa's kit will be, and even if C6R5 Cryo Traveler is comparable to Odette, Odette is still generally better than them, as Odette is part of the damage ceiling for any stellar team. Her personal damage scales better with artifact investment as a proper 5-star unit, and when you consider vertical investment with extra cost, her C2 is incredibly powerful. On top of that, you commonly play Odette with Cryo Traveler, so they don't really compete with each other at the moment. Lastly, with so many strong stellar options available, I do think that there is a high likelihood that you will want to build 2 strong stellar teams, one Stellar Conduct team and one Stellar Swirl team. So even if Odette, Cryo Traveler, and the Tsaritsa fulfill similar roles in stellar teams, you can just play 2 different stellar teams and utilize them all. So ultimately, Odette is a very strong stellar support that works well with any stellar team now and likely in the future, so she'll be a valuable pull for the upcoming stellar meta of Snezhnaya. That's everything I wanted to cover about Odette. Thank you so much to all the theorycrafters who helped me with this video and allowed me to reference their calcs. These TCers include Temeyaro, MeowTews, raulfigas, Frost, Jaxon, Sleepy, and Talah from Mobalytics. All of them are amazing, and I couldn't have made this guide without their help and support. I hope this guide and analysis was helpful to you all in giving you a better understanding of everything related to Odette. Just clicking and watching the video helps the channel out immensely, and if you want to show even more support, consider liking or sharing the video, or click the subscribe button for more Genshin guide and analysis analysis videos in the future. Leave any questions you have in the comments, and for all of you planning on wishing, I wish you all the best of luck on your Odette pulls.